Hey, it's Kyle Madson with your top stories on Sports 1140. The Kings got a win over the Grizzlies last night at the Golden One Center, 97-92. Buddy Hield had a team-high 23 points. De'Aaron Fox had 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. Marvin Bagley added 13 points and 6 boards in 22 minutes. The Kings are off today, so they don't play tonight. The Red Sox took a 2-0 lead in the World Series with a 4-2 win over the Dodgers. Last night, J.D. Martinez's 2-run single in the fifth broke a 2-2 tie to lift the Red Sox to a victory. And Week 8 of the NFL season kicks off tonight. And you can listen to that right here on Sports 1140. The Dolphins are in Houston to take on the Texans, who have won 4 in a row. Fun matchup here between a couple of 4-3 teams. Kickoff is slated for 5:20. Those are your top stories. And now back to the drive on Sports 1140 KHTK.
Rise and shine, sleepyhead.
I'm not letting you go to work today.
Wait, what?
Everybody, listen up.
Welcome to The Drive.
Morning, morning, morning.
You're gonna talk.
Get on the phone at 339-1140.
Pretty awesome, huh?
Jump in on our text line at 441140.
Everyone is talking about it. You must know that.
The Drive starts now.
Sam Amick in about a half an hour from The Athletic. Luke Bornn coming up next. I'm looking forward to this. This is all my idea. So, my fault. Or give me the credit. You know, you see the what?
That's actually the next movie in the Bornn franchise, the Bornn Idea.
The Bornn Idea, we're having Luke Bornn next. I see what you did there. By the way, have you seen any of those movies?
They're all on the list.
Are they on the list? Did we put those on the list? Okay. Which we, by the way, have not gotten to that
I need
list.
to get back into that.
Yeah. From the 916, Dodgers lose, Kings win. Yes. That's a great text right there. A lot of people worried about these rotations.
Are you sure that's a great text?
If you gave me a choice because of the magnitude of the games, if you gave me a choice between the Kings, if the Kings had to lose last night for the Dodgers to lose, get blown out, Kings. I was trying to say, if I had to trade a Kings loss for a Dodgers loss because it was the World Series and I hate the Dodgers, I would have taken it. But instead, I said the opposite of loss. And now Kyle, blown out, Kings. Kyle has that for all eternity. So with Luke here, and Kyle's going to get Luke on the phone right now, we're going to cover a lot of the things. Now, some of you may understand this, but Luke Bornn's a guy who's like taught classes at, MIT type places. Luke's a guy who's published papers, probably invented half of these. He hangs out at places like Harvard. And this makes me feel good as a Kings fan to know. We see the players, we see the coaches, but a lot of times in the past, we don't know about the scouts. We don't know about the analytics. We don't know about the brains. And guys like Luke Bornn and Ken Catanella and a lot of the guys back there are doing work. So you might hear or be familiar with or read about stats, analytics, like win shares, plus minus, box plus minus, defensive rating. I see defensive rating, right? And I go, okay, well, that means he's a good defender. The higher your defensive rating, the better a defender you are. Well, I understand that. But, what does that entail? How do you tell? Is it just points scored while the guy's on the floor? I don't know. We'll figure all this out. The bottom line here, and the title of this segment should probably be Luke is smart, I'm stupid, and I'm going to try to get him to come down to my level a little bit and explain some of this stuff because he's a very intelligent young man joining us right now, the VP of Strategy and Analytics for your Sacramento Kings, Luke Bornn. Luke, it's Dave. Thanks for joining us on a morning after a Sacramento Kings victory. How are you?
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem. Good mood today. Big win last night. And as I was explaining before you came on, Luke, analytics are spreading into the mainstream. They already have. No longer are they, for the back rooms and the nerds and all that, as people say. No, this is factoring in big time. And you're seeing a lot of this stuff around. And I need somebody to help me understand some of these things. Have you been surprised at all at the growth as far as mainstream of these analytics over the last few years, or did you fully expect it?
I think a lot of this is just basketball catching up to baseball. You know, the Moneyball era hit baseball well over a decade ago, and so baseball fans are used to seeing things like OBP plus and slugging percentage, things that, you know, weren't talked about 20 years ago. And so that sort of quantitative way of thinking about the game is just taking a little bit longer to hit basketball, but it's definitely hitting us now.
So when we look at these numbers, and I wrote a bunch of these down, and I want to try to get to as many as I can. I'll start with win shares. A player has a win share, and you see that. What is that?
Yeah, so a lot of these metrics, when you look at them, are fundamentally coming from the same thing. What most of these are doing, so win shares would be one of them, and some of the others that you see out there, box plus minus and offensive rating and PER. Essentially what they're doing is they're taking all these box score metrics, so these are things like, you know, 2-point attempts and rebounds and turnovers and assists, all the things that are sort of tabulated throughout a game. And they're basically just weighting them differently and trying to find some combination of them to estimate something. But win shares in particular is trying to estimate essentially the number of wins created by a player. So it's trying to say, okay, this team won, let's say, 30 games. Maybe a certain player is responsible for 5 of those wins, another player is responsible for 2 of those wins, etc.
Now, and as far as finding out or determining, let's just take Kings. Let's say the Kings win 60 games this year, and Buddy Hield has an XYZ win share. I mean, and if this is way too deep, stop me, but what are some of the things that go into that? Is that minutes played plus minus on the floor? Is it a kind of a combination of a lot of the other analytics that make that up?
Yeah, it's using everything. Essentially, it's using everything that comes from a box score to say, okay, how do we apportion those wins? And so it would use a combination of, okay, how much did he turn over the ball? How many rebounds did he get? And maybe the simplest way to think of it is that, okay, naively you could say, okay, maybe Buddy scored 500 points, let's say.
Sure.
Right? And so let's say he scores 500 points. Well, we wouldn't necessarily attribute wins based solely on points, because even if a player, let's say, makes a 3-point shot, should you give him sort of 3 points worth of credit? Well, probably not, because you got to give some of those 3 points to the person that assisted that shot. Sure. And you got to give some of the credit to the guy who got the defensive rebound on the other end. You got to give some credit to the guy who set the off-ball screen that led to that open shot. So it's a bit tricky, right? Because you got to sort of think, okay, every point that's scored, we need to apportion the credit to all the actions that happen on the court, and that's essentially what all of these metrics are trying to do.
So when you're, and I'm getting a little off key here, but this is something I've always wondered. I know, I've read a little bit about wearables, which aren't happening quite yet, and the future of a lot of this stuff. What is your thought on a lot of the accuracy of these? And for example, I've often wondered assists, for example, that assists can be highly subjective depending on what stadium you're at, who's doing the scoring. Did a guy have 1 or 2 dribbles after the pump fake, etc. Same thing, like you said, like an off-ball screen, you have to give a guy credit. And I'm imagining, are there people just sitting there tallying stuff like this? And are we going to get a lot better at being more accurate at this stuff in the future?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things here. One is we are collecting a lot more data than we ever did, and a lot of that's automated now. So in the rafters of Golden 1, there's 10 cameras that are set up that are pointing at the court that track the locations of all the players 25 times per second. And from that, a lot of automated things are pulled out, like when they set screens and where, touches in the paint, all that kind of thing. But what you're referring to is sort of more subjective measures, which are actually tabulated by a stats crew on the sidelines. And in fact, the next game, find me and I can introduce you to them. So there are a whole bunch of subjective stats that are collected. Assists, as you mentioned, are one of them. Blocks is another one. In fact, one of our analytics guys, Matt Van Bommel, sort of wrote the key piece on this about 4 or 5 years ago, where he showed that if you look across the league, there's a big disparity in sort of how generous and different scorekeepers are. So you end up with some arenas tend to award more assists, some arenas tend to award more blocks, etc.
That's fascinating. I've always wondered that, Luke, and I will take you up on that, because I imagine these guys have a difficult job. Dumb question here, but most of these are coming from a place of my brain, not yours. I understand how assists are subjective. How are blocks subjective? I always thought of that. A guy shoots the ball and another guy touches it on the way up. It's a block.
Yeah, you'd think so, but it's actually not quite so clear. You end up with some things being considered tips. You'd think it's really clear, but you definitely get a little bit of ambiguity around the edges.
Luke Bornn with us from your Sacramento Kings, VP of Strategy and Analytics. Luke, plus minus, and I first remember seeing this in hockey. As I understand it, plus minus, if I'm on the floor and I play 5 minutes, and in that 5 minutes my team outscores the other by 4, and then I go to the bench and don't play again, my plus minus is plus 4. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's maybe the simplest way to think of it, right? If you go on and your team's, as you say, like up 5, and then when you come off you're up 15, you would sort of say your plus minus is plus 10.
Okay.
And so that's it comes from hockey, but it's something that's been collected for quite some time now. There's some downsides to it, definitely. You can imagine that if you just got traded to a really good team, your plus minus is going to go through the roof because you're playing with really good players. So there's two big ways that you can look at that are much better than plus minus. The first is sort of to look at on-off splits, and maybe the simplest way to think about that is what's the plus minus when you're on the floor versus when you're off the floor. So if the team tends to, you tend to go up on runs when you're on the floor, and the team tends to do worse when you're off the floor, that's a good thing. And then there's a whole class of metrics. You might have heard of RPM or RAPM, which are essentially like adjusted essentially plus minus, but they're adjusting for who else is on the court with you. So it would say, because you're always playing with a bunch of superstars, we're going to downweight your performance in a way to account for who you're playing with and who's on the other end of the floor as well.
Luke Bornn with us. So as we advance in there from plus minus, what is the difference between plus minus and box plus minus?
Yeah, so these things that I mentioned, this adjusted plus minus, which is essentially trying to, again, measure your impact in when you're on the floor, and it's actually measured in points per 100 possessions. So if you are minus 10, that means that in every 100 possessions you're on the floor, you impact your team score by minus 10. So that would be really bad. Similarly, plus 10 would say every 100 possessions you're on the floor, you improve your team score differential by 100 points. So that'd be a good thing. So what box plus minus is actually another box score-based metric. It has plus minus in the title, so it's confusing, but it's just a box score-based metric. And what it's trying to do is actually estimate plus minus using box score metrics. So it's essentially, so the way it's actually built is someone took adjusted plus minus and then made a big model using all these box score metrics to try and predict plus minus, and that's what we ended up with, box plus minus.
Hey, Luke, I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing. I'm a big analytics guy, and whenever I try and bring up analytics or advanced stats, I get this response, or not always, but I get a response sometimes of people going, I watch the games. I just watch the games. How do you dispel that notion of you guys don't watch games, because you clearly do?
Yeah, we definitely watch a lot of games. We watch a lot of basketball. Maybe the simplest way to think of it is that, that person may have watched one game, but the numbers saw all 1280. So we're able to cover a lot more games. You don't have this bias that comes. You can imagine that if you go in and you watch a game where a player sort of scored 50 points, as an example, you might think something very different than if you walked in on the night when he scored 10 points. And so there's a lot of bias that can happen, just sort of human decision-making and the way we tend to think and observe things, that the number sort of removes. So that's maybe the first thing, is we can see a lot more games. And because we see a lot more games, you don't have the bias that comes by just seeing one or two games.
Let's get to ratings, as we're talking to Luke Bornn, and not my ratings, but ratings when it comes to analytics. And we'll start with offensive and defensive ratings. I see this, and as I explained before you came on, Luke, here's how I work as a Kings fan. I see offensive rating, and I see one of our players up there. I go, he's good on offense. Same thing on defense. I see Willie Cauley-Stein up there. I go, oh, he's really good at defense. That's awesome. I love this stat. But I don't know how it's gathered. So, again, offensive and defensive rating.
So maybe the first thing I should note is that people in the analytics community, maybe sort of in front offices in general, don't tend to think about per game metrics. Okay. So we would not really talk about, okay, this guy's worth, you often hear in the media, say, oh, this guy's worth 20 and 10 every night. But is that in 5 minutes of play, or is that in 15 minutes of play, or is that in 30 minutes of play? Because that makes a big difference. So we tend to think about everything normalized, and the simplest thing is to normalize by minutes. But actually, because of pace, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, we actually normalize everything to per 100 possessions. So we say, how good is this player per every 100 possessions he's on the court, rather than thinking about per every game he's on the court. And so because of that, offensive rating is, at the team level is really, really easy to think about. Offensive rating at the team level is just saying how many points does this team score per 100 possessions. So for every 100 trips up and down the floor, how many points on average does the team score? So that's what offensive rating is. And defensive rating, I'm sure as you would guess, is sort of the corollary, which is that for every 100 possessions you're on the floor, how many points does the opposite team score against you?
So then,
at the team level, it's a pretty.
No, I'm sorry. Look, go ahead.
No, so at the team level, it's a pretty simple one to understand because you just tabulate points and divide by possessions. But at the player level, it's a bit more complicated, and it's using box score numbers like points and rebounds and assists and turnovers to say, okay, if a team has an offensive rating of 105, which is to say every 100 possessions they score 105 points, how many of those does each player get credit for? And so that's at the individual level. It ends up being this really complicated formula with dozens and dozens of terms to try and apportion the credit across the players.
VP of Analytics and Strategy, Luke Bornn, joining us here, Sacramento Kings. Am I off? Is it too simplistic to say net rating is just basically the combo of offensive and defensive rating and what we come up with when those two offset?
Yeah, exactly right. So it's basically just subtracting the two, so you get a combination of what they're worth on offense and defense. So it's sort of like the net change. Instead of thinking about the difference in points scored or points against, it's the impact on score differential. In other words, your score minus their score.
I knew we were going to get close on time because we have 5 minutes left, so I got to cherry pick the ones I have left here because this is seriously fascinating to me. Let's go to TPA. I'm seeing a lot of TPA. I see it on Twitter where they have the little. Okay, here we go. I'm going to get very intelligent here. They have the graphy thing with the diagonal line, and the defense is on like the left, and the offense is on the bottom. And then they have
big words,
they have the little pictures of the Kings players and their heads that go up and down. So I like it because I've seen a lot of Kings players doing well in that. What the heck is TPA?
So TPA stands for total points added. And one of these metrics that we mentioned earlier, which is box plus minus, essentially this is using box score metrics to estimate how many points you contribute per 100 possessions. So it's saying, again, a number of 10 means you add 10 points per 100 possessions. Minus 10 is you take away 10 points per 100 possessions. And so the thing is, because these things are per 100 possessions, you don't get a notion of what the sort of overall commitment is, because a player who's really good but only played 100 possessions, well, that's not that useful. But a player who's really good and played, let's say 2,000 possessions, that's worth a lot more. And so what TPA, total points added, does is it essentially just takes this rate metric, which is per 100 possessions, and times it by the number of possessions. So it's that simple.
Okay. That actually makes kind of – I'm getting everybody on the text lines like, yeah, look at Dave trying to understand what Luke's saying. No, it actually makes a lot of sense. So you talk about TPA – finally, from all the numbers I'm going to ask you about, the one we probably hear about the most is pace. And here's right. My thought is pace means they go fast or they go slow, but I have a feeling it's a little more complicated.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Pace is just, we talk a lot about possessions. If you're not sort of thinking about it, not in the analytics community a whole lot, you probably haven't thought much about in terms of thinking about possessions and plays and so on. But pace is just how many possessions the team gets in a game. So, if you look back at the even 15 years ago, like take the 01-02 Kings, right? That team had the fastest pace in the league at 95.6. So what that means is that over the course of that season, that 2001-2002 season, on average per game, they'd be up and down the court 95.6 times.
Wow.
In contrast, this season, the Kings are already at 104.9. In other words, they're moving a lot faster. And in fact, the slowest team so far this year is the Spurs, and they're 96.7. So in other words, the Kings in 01-02 were the fastest team in the league, getting up and down the court 95.6 times. And so far this season, the slowest team is faster than that.
That's insane. That is just insane how. And Luke, do you think that a lot of what we've, obviously not what we've talked about today, but people like yourself, the analytics community, and the influx of these numbers into the game, do you think that has helped increase that scoring, that pace, that it, much like in baseball, people are seeing these numbers, and that's informing scouting, drafting, and the way coaching is happening?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's two big factors that are driving things. The first one, the simplest one to think about is rule changes.
Sure.
Obviously, take an example, this year there's the new 14 seconds. So after an offensive rebound, instead of the shot clock play we're setting, it only goes to 14 seconds. Yep. So that speeds up possessions. But the other aspect, definitely, analytics is changing the way the game's played. If you look at three-point attempt rate, it's just steadily climbed year after year after year after year, and obviously that changes the way that teams run their offenses. It changes the way teams run their defenses.
Luke, last thing for you, totally impossible question to ask you. It's probably like having to choose between kids or your favorite stuffed animal or whatever the heck, but obviously you've literally written papers and books on this stuff. Is there one advanced metric, stat, analytic, whatever you want to call it, from dumb guys like me? Is there one that stands out to you that you think, as far as right now, can inform people most accurately about a player's worth?
It's a good question. You I think the ones that are publicly available?
Yes. Let me stick to that. Yeah, because that I have the closest of understanding, and really mostly understanding. Again, if I'm me and I'm looking at advanced metrics, the one maybe I want to pay attention to the most to understand whether or not a player is good.
Right. Yeah. So there's, as you said, there's this suite of metrics: win shares, PER, offensive rating, box plus minus. And if you look at them and you really analyze and compare them, again, they're all using the same underlying data, but just sort of weighting. One puts more weight on rebounds, another puts more weight on steals, etc. Some of them are really offensively biased. So if you look at PER, which you may have seen, it's this metric which is sort of average. The average of this metric is 15, and then it's sort of, the number up around 25 is really good, sort of 5 is really bad. That it's really offensively biased, so it tends to capture the players at the top tend to be really offensive players. The metric I think that I think fans might find the most sort of that passes the eye test is the one we talked about earlier, which is box plus minus, which is trying to use box score stats to estimate the player's impact on the plus minus when they're on the court. And so the one caveat I would give is that that's per 100 possessions. So you sort of need to look at that in combination with how many minutes or how many possessions the player's played. Because if a player might be at the top of that list, but if they've only played 3 minutes, of course, you need to more or less ignore it.
That is Luke Bornn, and you can learn something listening to sports radio. Seriously, Luke, that's so informative. And I read the David Stern Sports Illustrated piece yesterday when he was really going into wearables, and that someday soon you're going to be able to sit back and see that Buddy Hield is thirsty, or some guy's facial recognition looks one way or the other. And the way the game is going, this is going to be so unbelievably vital if you really want to be informed on the game, who's good, who's not, and how your team looks, how it doesn't look. And the fact of the matter is, for you to be able to, I'm sure, this is probably a lot of work for you to try to dumb it down to my level, but I really appreciate it, and I'd love to have you on again sometime to help us learn more.
Absolutely. It's been fun. Thanks.
All right, brother. Thank you. That is Luke Bornn. We will pause and take a break because Sam Amick's going to – that's so cool. Seriously. Did I understand 100% of what he said? Yeah. Did I understand 65% of what he said? Maybe. But I think it's fascinating. And if you weren't watching the video cast, I will tell you right now, the greatest good question of all time just happened at the end of that segment. I'm wearing the crown. To get a guy who probably has a 700 IQ, like Luke Bornn, to say to me, good question, that's a good question. I don't know how you top that. That's like the late, great Stephen Hawking saying, you're making me think. I got to think about that one. Or I hadn't thought of that before. Man, look at the big brain on Dave.
That's awesome, man. That's why you need a huge hat to fit all your brain in it.
I almost started crying. I did. Got a little teary. Not going to lie.
Hey, before we go.
Yeah.
My yurt poll is over.
Excuse
My
me?
poll about how many people had ever gone camping in a yurt.
Oh, okay.
What percentage do you think said yes?
What percentage of people said they'd ever camped in a yurt?
Out of 374 votes.
20?
20 people?
No, you said percent. 20,
Yeah.
20% have camped in a yurt.
9%.
Missing out.
That's what somebody was like, dude, it's awesome. It's like camping, but you get to sleep good.
You get to sleep well. You can cook. There's a barbecue. There's a stove. And you have, at least the one I stay in, you have direct TV, but it's still like a cabin. You're in the middle of the woods. How many didn't know what the hell a yurt was?
56%.
Okay.
Hey, you can buy one for the low price of $37,000.
No, I looked it up because we thought about buying one. You can get one for you can get a decent one for $5,000 to $10,000.
Oh.
And then you just got to buy the property and make sure all the
Giving
hookups
those
are there.
things away.
All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, Sam Amick of The Athletic right here on Sports 1140 KHTK.
This is Kyle Madson with your top stories on Sports 1140. The Kings got a win last night, 97-92 over the Memphis Grizzlies. De'Aaron Fox had 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. Buddy Hield led the way for the Kings, points-wise anyways, with 23 points. Marvin Bagley had a good game, 13.6 boards in 22 minutes. Week 8 of the NFL season kicks off tonight right here on Sports 1140. The Dolphins are in Houston to take on the Texans. The Texans have won 4 in a row. Both these teams are 4-3. Kickoff is slated for 5:20. Those are your top stories. And now back to the drive on Sports 1140 KHT.
Okay.
Oh, and the Dodgers lost last night. Forgot to give that.
Dodgers.
The drive continues now.
Wow.
Get to Sam Amick in a couple minutes here. I'm Matt at the text line, so let's handle this real quick.
Yeah, I knew you were going to come in on fire
dude,
right now.
Come on. From the Jiffy Lube text line at 441140, I'll start with Jason and Lincoln. Dave, good question is a professional interviewee pause word, which gives them a few moments to formulate the response without having to say too much. He mentioned of the stats publicly available, he had to be careful. Sorry, no crown for you, but it was a decent question. Shut up, Jason. How about that? How about nobody likes you?
I already told him to stay in his lane.
Yeah, stay in your lane, Jason.
Yeah, we got him.
It's a good. You know what? You say a good question.
Thanks,
It's a good question. Okay. By the way, Luke Bornn probably not a professional interviewee.
Yeah.
I mean, Luke's done plenty of whatever, I'm sure, but I don't think Luke's doing a lot of radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know what, Jason? I don't come to your job and knock the
no.
the
Don't even know where
calculator
you
out of
work, Jason.
Your face.
Yeah.
From the 209. I got to find a different voice for this one. God, a lot of snark on the text line today. We're talking about yurts. From the 209. Really, guys, that's not camping. That's called glamping. Camping should definitely not have a TV. Just stay at home if you need all that for camping. Sincerely, Andy. Listen up, Andy.
Yeah, Andy.
Guy or perhaps girl.
No if, Andys, or buts
Thank
about
you.
this.
Here's the deal. When I've camped my whole life because my dad's Mr. Outdoors face, and I've done it all.
And you drive a Hoblet Ram, so you're obligated to go camping.
You know what I call that? Hoblet Ram? It's called ramping. Okay? Here's the deal.
Hey, it's okay. You're fine.
Yeah. Here's the deal. The yurt is not glamping. It's kind of glamping, but here's the deal. When I say here's the deal like 5 times. When I've got my kids and my wife and they get their own bed and I get a bed and I don't have to worry about bugs, hard floors, they can throw on the TV when it's time to go to bed. I can cook. I'm not dirty and crappy and junky. And I get all the... Listen, it's not like my house. It's still a freaking cabin, right? I still got to light a fire, but when I step outside, oh my God, I'm camping. Like I'm in the middle of the woods. I'm looking at Yosemite, and then I go back inside. Oh, I'm nice comfortable. Let me turn up the heat. I'll take that. Why would I? The camping experience does not increase because of suffering, in my opinion. It's a perfect combination of both. I can't stay at home and go outside and see Yosemite.
And you're not in a house.
No.
A strong wind is still knocking that yurt down.
That's right. So as somebody keeps saying on the text line, hey, Jason and Andy, why don't you lick a dirty fly swatter?
Yeah, swat some flies and then ew.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, Sam's ready. Kyle's like the Flava Flav of radio. That's hilarious.
Does Sam still want to come on the show?
I hope so. Yeah, we should get, because we have a short time with Sam. Sam's actually getting off easy this week. Sam's normally in the spot we gave to Luke Bornn there. And now we'll blow through this next break a little bit with Sam because we only get him once a week, but I got to ask him about this Chris Paul stuff, his thoughts on the Kings. If you got a question for Sam, you can give us a call, handle that. I might get it in at 339-1140, 1-800-920-1140. And then we've got some John Gruden sound to play for you in the What's on Tap section of this. Might get back to that Mike Ditka sound, too. We played sound that was unearthed from 1987 of Mike Ditka just trashed on a TV show. Joining us right now from The Athletic, the one, the only, the lovely, the talented Samuel Amick. Hello, Sam.
Hello, David. Good morning, my friends.
How are you?
I'm trying to get the cobwebs off and bring the energy for you. And late night at Oracle, late night of writing, late night of Steph Curry pontificating.
Oh, I'm Sam Amick. I had to be at Oracle because the Warriors are great. I couldn't be at Golden One where the Kings won last night. But that's okay. Don't worry about it.
But Steph was incredible.
Did you see your wife give me a hard time on Facebook?
No. Did she go after you? What'd Melissa say to you?
It's actually great. I feel bad I didn't respond yet, but I did see it. I put a picture up that said, "It's that time of year again," and it had my laptop with the Sixers-Bucks game, a tablet in front of the laptop that had Jazz Rockets, and then in person, the Warriors game. And it was just kind of capturing the chaos of all the basketball that you end up watching. And then she just writes, she goes, "Yeah, still no Kings," with an angry face.
That's my wife right there, buddy. That's okay. We keep having games like last night. We keep having games like we did in Oklahoma City. Hey, in all seriousness, Sam's job is to serve the national public here. That's why he writes for The Athletic. And, I hate to say it, but probably a couple more people nationally interested in the Warriors and Steph Curry than the Kings, maybe 2 or 3 at this point. But through the first 5 games, and you're talking to a guy here that thought they were going to be between 3-17 and 6-14, Kings have looked a little bit better than maybe we thought they would.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was the guy, I published an anonymous scout who said that they would have a hard time getting to 20 wins. So they are doing well in that regard and doing a few things. And as I sit here scrambling to look at the box score so I can pretend I know exactly what happened.
They won, I promise.
I really thought that Buddy, Buddy Hield is a guy that with that trade, waiting for him to have a good night. So 23 out of Buddy is really nice. And Aaron, 7 of 16 from the field is a little rough. You'd like to see that above 50%.
Get out of here.
Well, Sam, were you at the game?
It's like how were you in 2 places at once, Sam?
Crazy.
Marvin Bagley, it's nice to see him get the minutes. 22 minutes is up, and a little production. But no, I mean, what's crazy about the early season is like, who did Memphis knock someone off?
Yeah, Memphis just won in Utah 2 nights ago.
Yeah, it's always fun because some of this stuff makes no sense, and you try to get an early read on things. But no, it's another good win.
Sam Amick of The Athletic with us. Were you at Oracle? I will ask you this. Were you at Oracle when Steph Curry made that pregame bouncy shot thing that looked completely impossible?
I saw the video. I saw the video. That's it. And then I'm sure you saw the other one that was during a break in the action, in the lane, tossing it up, finger roll style, but literally 20 feet above the backboard, and it fell through. And Jeff Green had this look on his face, like, who is this guy and how does he do this stuff? I mean, it was crazy. It's funny, and I kind of wrote this, and I feel like I say this every time we come on the air, but one of the fun parts about The Athletic is I get to interject my own views a little more freely than before. And I mentioned in my column that I missed. Remember when Klay Thompson had 60 points in 3 quarters?
Oh no, I don't.
As against the Pacers, yeah.
Yeah. Dave,
Yeah.
your Kings won. Would you cheer up?
Okay,
You're
fine.
okay.
Yeah, Clay was good.
Yeah.
I remember.
All right, fine. Regardless, I missed the game. Like, I was supposed to go that night. I didn't go. And as a basketball writer, it's okay to admit that, you enjoy seeing these incredible performances. So I missed Clay's game. And then I was not initially planning on going to Steph's or going to the Warriors game last night, but it was something else. I mean, when Oracle is in the past when it comes to their history, I think they're going to miss nights like that when it comes to the building, because it's going to be hard to recreate just the buzz and the type of night that they had last night.
Could Steph Curry step away from the NBA for 2 weeks, get 2 weeks of training? Could Steph be the greatest globetrotter of all time on 2 weeks training? I've never thought of that before, but my God, I don't know. Listen, people are going to say Pete Maravich and some other, and I get it, like, fine. But as much as I can't stand the Warriors and get tired of them, the guy does things that are insane and shouldn't happen on a basketball floor.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just go watch a reel of those 11 threes last night, and then, he joked about this afterwards, even he bombs from 40 feet, air balls late in the third quarter. And, and Steve Kerr even said that, as a coach, it's a little weird to sit there and say, oh, that's a pretty good shot. It's okay. He missed it because nothing was out of range for that guy. But, yeah, I mean, he could certainly do the Globetrotter thing. He could do anything. I mean, it's probably why he's very good at golf. He just has this incredible knack, just the hand-eye coordination, the instincts and all the above. He's an incredible player.
With all the NBA that you've covered, are there still times like that game last night where you kind of sit back and you're surprised by what you've seen?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and Steph has done a lot of it. I think if I was based back east, I don't know, maybe, it comes through on the television, but it's not the same, as when you're there in person. But last night essentially took, I think, all of us back to 2014 to 2016, and certainly that 15-16, campaign. Him hitting 402 three-pointers it's the kind of thing we never thought we'd see. But the thing is, we did think we might see it again. We did not know that Kevin Durant was coming. We didn't know the Warriors were going to change. And so you just kind of thought, that's just who this guy is. And that is what I found so fascinating about last night, is that guy is back and has been back for the first 5 games. I mean, I know it's early, but 5 games is also not nothing. So he's, this is just kind of fun with numbers, but he's on track to hit 541 threes. His numbers are through the roof. I think he's shooting 52% from beyond the arc. And so, yeah, I mean, you marvel at what a lot of these guys can do. I think if you had that distinct category of people who just leave you shaking your head, he might be number 1 for me when he's at his best. Tim Bontemps is a buddy of mine from the Washington Post, and this was in the column too. So Tim has taken a job with ESPN soon. Super happy for him. He's moving back east. Tim lives in San Francisco, and he sat there on press row last night, and he just made this point. He goes, "Man, I'm going to miss seeing that guy play in person as much." And it's just the kind of honesty that you don't typically hear from media members, but it's just kind of the effect the guy has.
Sam Amick joining us right now, Sports 1140 KHTK from The Athletic. All right, I got 2 questions, and I got 3 minutes, and I got to get to it. Chris Paul, Rajon Rondo, Brandon Ingram. Is that about what you thought the suspensions would be? Or that does not seem like that's a closed matter on the floor.
No, I thought it was too light. Yep. I think it maybe opens the door for other players, thinking harder about actually swinging when they have issues on the floor. If I was in their shoes, I know it's a lot of money. I still think they partly think just about games missed. And so if you're sitting there going, man, I'm tired of this guy and I'm going to miss 2 games, 3 games for, taking a swing at him, then maybe I do it. Because before, the fear was that you'd be like Carmelo Anthony, it'd be 15 games. So the NBA is certainly pushing back on it. And, for what it's worth, and this is, call it propaganda, call it just spin or just truth, but League PR actually sent me a note a few minutes ago. The 4 games is the most they have given for a punch that did not connect in their history, which is a weird distinction.
Yeah.
Plus, I don't know if they actually. Can you even tell that he didn't connect? I mean, they're in the crowd.
Dude, he came up from behind the guy in the middle of a fight and tried to sucker punch. And what really was surprising to me, Sam, and we're going to get real old here, but I know you'll get the reference, is exactly one of the darkest moments in NBA history was Kermit Washington, Rudy Tomjanovich, and it obviously wasn't the same, Sam. I just get the feeling, I could be wrong, I just get the feeling if David Stern were still in charge, you could probably start by doubling all of those suspensions.
100%. And I don't know why you would think that David Stern was an edgy, hard-handed person in light of that Sports Illustrated article that came out.
Yeah, who'd have think that, right?
Yeah, I mean, David, that's just how he was. And that's with Adam, he has prioritized the relationship with the players. And, oh, by the way, one of the players is the head of the Players Association, and Chris Paul.
Yep.
So, I don't know. They are definitely trying to spin it. It's their league. It's not my, I don't have a NBA paycheck coming my way. I just think that if, in fact, the goal is to not have it be like the 80s when Charles Oakley and guys like that, felt free to by the way, Oak was at the game, which was pretty great.
I saw his breakdown of the fight, too. That was awesome.
Even it's like, this league's soft. They ain't going to do nothing. Everybody's soft. Players soft.
Right. Just don't screw with Oak, man. Ever.
Right. Yeah, so I think it was too light, but they are still defending it.
We appreciate you, and I will. I thought where my wife was going on Facebook was something like, "Oh, too bad you get to watch basketball games for a living." And I would have been Team Amick on that one, but I understand where she's coming from on that, and I'm sure we'll see your beautiful light brown, perhaps dark red hair, your corduroy, freckles maybe when you've been out in the sun, maybe not. We'll see all of that at the Golden One Center sometime soon.
That was a little creepy, buddy. You're getting on the creepy side. Don't be describing me like that. You're not doing that.
I like when the freckles come out in the sun.
Okay.
Hey, have fun. I'll talk to you before Halloween. I was going to say you got 2 little ones like me dressing up, so we'll have to get into that next time. Appreciate you moving forward.
I'm excited for Halloween, man. We're going to be the Incredibles.
Really? Doing the whole family thing?
Yep.
Yeah, babe.
I got to hit the weight room, though. I think I'm a little behind.
Duct tape, bro. Just wrap it around. It's something I can give you a lot of cushy poker player tips, dude. I'll talk to you.
Well done. I'll see you.
All right, bye. Later. That's Sam Amick. We'll take a break. The Incredibles. We'll come back. Well, what's on tap? Abbreviated version because we went long with Sam, but that's fine. Sports 1140 KHTK. All right, what's on tap today? We will start with a little bit of football because the Kings are off. World Series is off. You've got Houston and the Dolphins tonight. Kyle, that game is in Houston.
Yeah, it sure is.
Dolphins favored by 7.5. That seems a little large.
Dolphins favored by how many?
Dolphins favored by 7.5.
That's what she said.
Is Deshaun Watson not playing or something?
Yeah, he's, as far as I see, he's playing. Doesn't that seem a little off?
Seems like a lot.
I feel like that line should be somewhere around 4.5.
Yeah, hey, I got to give these away. $50 gift card to Islands. Try out Islands Roseville
give those away.
Across from Sunsplash Water Park on the corner of Taylor and Roseville Parkway, and Islands Folsom, located on Iron Point Road in front of Best Buy. All KHTK giveaways are powered by RosevilleAutomall.com. Let's do fourth and fifth caller right now. Gets a $50 gift card. I need to go try this place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always in for a new burger joint.
1 billion%. Not 100%.
A billion.
For Eunice behind the scenes, I'm Kyle Madson. I'm Carmichael Dave. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. right here on Sports 1140 KHTK. Bye-bye now.